Good afternoon, everyone. I'm nicoleciccolo, head of the communications area of the research project called Kefin Project. We welcome all the Italian press accredited in attendance, and all the press connected remotely. This is a special press conference to exclusively reveal the results of an absolutely innovative and revolutionary study made possible by the union of a team of researchers who have combined their specific historical, archaeological, scientific and technological skills. In particular, Professor Corrado Malanga, researcher and head of the research project, engineer Filippo Biondi, specialist in SAR technology, and Dr. Armando, expert in Egyptology thanks to the SAR technology with synthetic aperture combined with the new methodology of Doppler tomography. The research group present here has made a series of unprecedented discoveries located under the Piana di Giza. This technological innovation consists in converting photonic radar information into phonic signals. This would allow us to explore structures buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. And let's talk about the research that we did. It's an innovative research that actually started several years ago when we started working on the Chiopnilusu pyramid, as it is called, by the experts. From that point of view, we started writing scientific papers and books that talked about what we found with the synthetic aperture radar. The synthetic aperture radar is a technique that involves using a radar placed at about 680 kilometers in orbit around the planet that transforms photonic signals into phonemic signals. That is, it transforms light into sound, into vibration, everything that we can therefore see as a sound image of the things that we go to see. This technique allows us to look inside things like you. No photons, light stops in front of money, but sound doesn't. Granite has a speed of sound of about 4,000 meters per second, water 1,400 meters, air 340 meters per second. So if we can transform light in a sound, what will appear to us is that granite is more transparent than glass. This allows us to see inside ancient monuments such as the three plains of the Giza plant without spar. Going to look more closely at the structure of these spots, we realize clearly, and these machines you have too, but in reality there are 5, 2 in front, 2 behind and 1 in the middle. These spots are similar to the same spots that we recorded in one in particular in the Nouveau pyramid. It is a zen of a structure that we had essentially already seen in the pyramid that we had analyzed. Of these structures there are 5. Now tomorrow in the conference Panelia we will show how we arrive at these results, because with the radar we can make different tomographies looking at the scene from multiple points of view, and thus build a 3-dimensional image reconstructing perfectly stone by stone. Everything we see, a single tomography is not enough. It would not be enough just this image to arrive at the solution of the problem that we will then show you with the construction of a 3-dimensional model. This is an image taken from another point of view. You have to always have the same objects placed from another angle, and you have to make the awareness of these images enter inside of us, and this can only be done by looking at these images for hours, going back to look at the old topographies, going back to look at the new ones, trying to identify each structure in a three-dimensional way. At this point, we could finally build a three-dimensional model of our research, and we immediately realize tomorrow we will realize it better, because we will show piece by piece how we arrived at these results, that in the Khafre pyramid, that until the day before yesterday, and the Egyptologists said there was nothing, that is an empty mountain of stones. Basically, there are a lot of things. There are 5 places in a certain position connected to each other by probable paths that could actually be corridors, but what we see is that underneath this structure there are 8 vertical wrists surrounded by something that resembles a kind of, excuse me the term, spiral staircase. You see them here in another angle from another point of view. You see them here again from another point of view. Look how much stuff is in there. How many paths can you do? There are 2 rooms in particular. You see one large on the right behind and the other on the left, a little smaller at the back, that appear in the different tomographies, and that are certainly something that resembles rooms. Look how it appears to us from the front. And these vertical wells that go down to a certain distance depth, these vertical wells, as see them made from the tomographies, they will appear very, very clear. Up to how deep does this stuff go? The attempt was to understand this. You see, we put a kind of clear whether that simulates a path of water, because actually under a certain height EHM of the ground zero, let's say so, of the pyramid underneath, there is water. Under the path of water there is still stuff, and we go down until we find 2 structures of this kind that seem, when you look at them for the first time, you can't understand what it is. They are actually 2 boxes, 2 big giant boxes that we will discover later have about EHMMH, how the dimensions of 80 meters on each side, 2 boxes of 80 meters on each side. It is not a phenomenon of pareidolia as one might imagine, but it is the same computer that tells us, look, these are made like this, the boxes, and the computer with its analysis, and with the help of artificial intelligence reconstructs these 2 boxes, as you see here, where they enter in each box 4 of the tubes that start from the top and go down. We are at a depth of 648 meters. Only at this level, 648 meters. Let's look at how they appear to our tomography. The tubes that you see how they are made here. There are 8. They are in, let's say so, placed in 2 rows in the center of the side of the pyramid. And you see that they are, you can see, well surrounded by something that looks like a kind of spiral staircase that goes down. This spiral staircase, we have reconstructed it basically like this. You see there are 2 boxes in where in each box 8 go down, plus 4 on one side and 4 on the other. We are at 648 meters after what happens we needed, so we had realized that in looking with this technique EHM at the synthetic opening these things, not only had we found in the pyramid of Khafre a lot of stuff that no one had ever seen, but by moving away a bit with the vision we had seen that underneath there was stuff. and then we had to move even further away and in a tomography that tomorrow we will see. Piece by piece you can see inside the half of this gigantic tomography. You see at the top the pyramid of Khafre, on the left hidden by the tones of grey of the tomography there is the small pyramid EHM, which is the smallest pyramid of the plan, while in reality on the right invisible there is the pyramid of Klun Khufu. For you have to keep in mind that when we do a tomography we cut a cake. This cake has been cut in half of the pyramid of Khafre in half. The photographic plate that comes out, since it has the information of the vibration, is not affected by all the pixels of all the points that are inside the vibration of the plate, but by everything that is in front and everything that is behind, therefore building an image that at the beginning for non-experts is difficult to understand, but that later allows you to understand. It is a fundamental thing. Look, let's just take the central part of this tomography, and what we see is that under the central triangle that represents the two sides of the pyramid of Khafre at about 640 meters. There is this square box, this luminous plane that contains the two boxes that I showed you before, where you can glimpse with this type of response also the channels that go down that you can see here. You can only guess because I showed them to you in the previous tomography. The problem is, but underneath there is still some stuff. We go down for another 600 meters, and this allows us to understand that underneath there is a world that is made up of many things. For example, down here we are under the plane, under the pyramid of Kyobi, and all this stuff here. What is all this luminous stuff that vibrates when we will go and do, and tomorrow we will show it some enlargements. We will discover that underneath there is a real city in inverted commas. We are like depth at about 1,200 meters of depth. How do you calculate this? We know that a pixel is xcm long, so just take the number of pixels that the computer provides us, and we know exactly what we have in front of us tomorrow. We will also show how the human eye would see these things if it were technically placed on the satellite. I remind you that we have used two satellites, not just one, so the two satellites give us completely coherent responses, so everything that could be a sound reflection, we know how to identify it perfectly because it is a sound reflection that we see on a satellite. On the other, it is not there because the other satellite is somewhere else and therefore sees things in a completely different way. Another thing needs to be underlined in our research. The two satellites that we have used, which are Capella Space and Umbra Space, provide us with the data free of charge. Everyone can retrieve this data EHM. Just go to the site of these two managers and download the data. So this research did not cost anything. I say this because compared to other methodologies, these other methodologies can be used to look inside the pyramids, such as the muonic method, that is the muons, which are particles in which the universe is full, irradiate the pyramids. If I put a camera under the pyramid with a photographic plate for muons, I can see how the photographic plate is impressed. A camera for new ones costs €1,800,000 euros to take a photograph, it takes 8 months, and in this context 1101-215 institutes, universities in the world have dealt with this with a project called Scampingham, which employs 30 people who work there and therefore a lot of time we instead have done it from home without needing a camera, which you have to keep in mind. It needs to be to put a photographic plate under the material, so you have to go there personally. The problem instead is that we solve it by looking at everything from above, making everything become transparent, a stone, a granite. And I repeat, it is more transparent than glass from this point of view. Substantially, while our research lasts a year, a few months, substantially the time to verify all the tens and tens of photographs taken by multiple satellites, the machine time needed to make the accumulations transformed by Fourier. It is said like this: of all these things, it is certainly not the money, the technology, the people that are necessary to discover a tenth of what we discover with this technology. So this is an innovative technology that allows you to look inside ancient monuments without going there, without moving a stone, therefore preserving this, which is the good, without altering its shape and structure. There are at this point a whole series of problems, and we will see better tomorrow, because tomorrow we will follow a path as if everyone had participated in this research and everyone piece by piece had understood every type of stone of the thing that we have studied. You can see well, the problem is, but then this research in this context at this moment, what does it produce as a partial result? Because it is obviously not finished yet. The result is this: there are some things you see, this research is not to be proven. It is not that we have to wait for other types of work or other scientists who can declare it true, because they are photographs, and I photographed the Tower of Pisa, and it is not that I need other 500 people to photograph the Tower of Pisa to say, there is a Tower of Pisa. So this research, as it is already foresees that these data are real. But what does this mean? It means that someone built something at 1,200 meters of depth. We want to believe that it was still the ancient Egyptians. Well, if we want to ask, believe it, let's believe it with hail. But the problem is that these are the questions that we now have to answer. Tomorrow we will only show things as they are, and we will send home the people who come to this conference, asking them to answer them, to make their own hypotheses on what we found, because what we found, but who built it, when they built it, for who built it, what was it for? These are answers that we will not give tomorrow, but that we will have, and will have the duty to give in the next meetings, in the next conferences. In the meantime, the need to carry on this study is evident, because history seems to me to have to be rewritten, and this will in fact be the program that we will set ourselves, because the Giza plane must be scanned completely to see exactly what is underneath, and everything that now appears as bright spots will soon have a more precise shape, and at that point it will be necessary that whoever is responsible somehow takes awareness of the fact that it is time to go and see by digging what is underneath. Then, as far as we know, these natural Cavities would have very precise shapes and tomographies that show a geometry that totally excludes the possibility that these are of a natural nature. Keep in mind, for example, these wells. These wells have this kind of, let's call it in inverted commas, a spiral staircase that rolls up to these wells, and the EHM luminosity of this luminous path has the characteristic of having been reconstructed on the computer, and it is not always the same brightness, because the boy considered these wrists as if they were made of glass. That is, you see both the front and the back, and when this luminous thing turns around and turns the other way, its luminous frequency, that is, its vibration, changes and changes with 3 degrees of different brightness, making you understand a fundamental thing, that these wells are actually tubes, that is, inside there is a vacuum, and they are all the same, and it will be very unlikely that it is something that was made by nature. It is clear that at this point the need to go and see for yourself. Therefore to S. Posting some stones is fundamental, because only by looking inside will we discover what is inside. Is like opening an Easter man. We have discovered the Easter egg, let's go and see the surprise, but we know that there is already a surprise. As you see, I will show you again the 3D construction. You understand exactly how the 3D model A reconstructs exactly what we see from a tomography. Tomorrow to show us 10 tomographies from 10 different points of view, where these wells are clearly seen in all their essence. Think that these wells substantially have an apparent diameter of 10 to 12 meters and a depth of at least 648 meters. One work thing is that some of these structures serve to support the pyramid, because we have done static calculations, and we have seen that the pyramid Khafre weighs a lot, and to hold it up you need a base, and because otherwise it descends into the sand fall. The calculations show that substantially in better years these structures have descended more or less half a meter. The builders evidently foresaw that you can't build a pyramid on sand, and then underneath it is necessary to build pillars that somehow reach the granite at the bottom, and that support a plate that tomorrow we will show exists, that supports on which the pyramid was built. FA question please here, but if there are structures 1,200 meters underground here, if I remember correctly 12,000 years ago, the water was lower than 120 meters, which is 3, so we are still in another historical era, because we are 1 kilometer below. Basically yes. In fact, who says that the pyramids were built 2,500 years before Christ? This is a question mark. That is becoming more and more, this hypothesis is becoming more and more not credible. This allows us to be able to say and to be able to make a certain number of banal observations. Then if the first ones have been built actually, as they say, we must remember that 450026 years ago, 2,500, even for Christ substantially, and the ancient Egyptians did not, they had the wheel, they did not have to write, they did not know how to write, they did not have the lever, they did not know how to cut the stone and how would they have built it? Thing that goes down to 1,200 meters underground in addition to all the Ambaradon of the Giza plain How did they move the stones that each of these stones of the Pyramid of Teo is taken 70 tons AEHM? There is someone who says no, but it is enough to put more men instead. If 10 men do not pass, I put 20, and we should make these people understand that putting 20 men around a stone that is 3 meters long is perhaps not easy but we should make these people understand that they have to understand, and this is the most difficult thing the last 3 years of the pandemic have made us understand. For example, that it is not such a simple thing, so we must start to think that it was the real plain of Giza did not see the light 4,500 years ago, but much earlier. I wanted to ask, and what led you to believe that these underground structures correspond to the halls of Aventis? And if you have considered the hypothesis that all this stuff is a big something that has to do with chemical reactions or with the possibility of extracting materials from the subsoil and industrial complex. Yes, I can answer if you want. Sure, our idea from an observation history is historicist, that is, who writes history books, is always someone who suits him to give an idea of what he wants to make people think. That history is the myth is not historicist. The myth represents the reality of the facts in a single frame. In the myth, the past, the present, and the future are written in that instant. The myth must be taken into consideration, it must be re-evaluated, and in the myth it is written there. Somewhere some halls called halls of which contain some, they say, some books, some others go further away, we don't know this, but where there's smoke there's always a bit of roast. This is the idea that made us think that these large structures were something that had to do with that stuff that is written in the book. Then at this moment we believe that these 8 wells that, from recent tomographies, we discovered to be also under the Pyramid of Cheops, and that at the time of the analysis we had not seen, because obviously we were not aware, so we did not go to look with the right eye under the Pyramid of Cheops. But now and tomorrow we will show you we realize that by doing a series of tomographies from a distance, also under the other 2 dynamics, and it is right if these columns are needed to maintain the stability of these pyramids. They also needed them under the Pyramid of Khufu and under the Pyramid of Menkaura by force of circumstances, but not now, as now we are of the idea that not only were they needed to create the stability of these large monuments, but now two or maybe 3 other purposes that I won't tell you about for now, because they would be based on little, but that clearly when we will have the opportunity to understand better or to go and see this stuff in person, then maybe we will understand that. Back then there was a technology that we don't have yet. Our idea is substantially linked to the fact that whoever they were had a strong Awareness and consciousness of what the physics of phonons is and not of photons, that is of the electromagnetic field. We are fixated on photons, on like Maxwell. Well, these people, in my modest point of view, knew how to work on vibrations, so much so that in the first works, that is in the work published on emote sensing, we say this by attributing to the structure of the pyramid of Cheops the functioning of an infrasonic machine that, moving with the wind, produced through those structures AZ. You have seen 5 of them here, placed practically in series in parallel, produced a certain vibration that cured the pharaoh or whoever for him. And also here, not only in the Egyptian myth, but in the ancient myths of all parts of the world, it is written how the ancients used sound to heal. Clearly, if we want to consider the myth a joke, then we can do it, but in front of the calculations that we have done, and we have seen that maybe there are some numbers that have a particular precision. People think that the ancient Egyptians did not know the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem was not only known by the ancient Egyptians, but they built a pyramid with it, because if you do not know the Pythagorean theorem, the pyramid cannot be built because it is really bad, and when one goes to do the calculations correctly, those glasses discover that the Khafre pyramid, like the Glun Khufu pyramid, are built not only on the 31.9 and not on the 3.16 as someone says, an approximation of the Termitoro, but also on the 16180.339, which is the section, or in a precise way this means essentially that the mathematics of the ancient builders of these monuments required a series of awareness and consciousness that we today believe that the ancient Egyptians did not have, and that instead it seems that they did not. That is, they had it. I can continue asking this because some of the internal structures and the pyramids look a lot like reactors. Reaction rooms are not just something that was used on a human level. That is, for people, the idea that I got while inside was that perhaps something that was used for a fluid. I don't know, but not so much to create a well. Then the important thing is to make hypotheses, because scientific research must be approached by making hypotheses, because if you don't make hypotheses, you don't know what to look for. No. Then the hypothesis must be validated, and from the measurements. So right now we are not able to say what all this structure is for unless we make hypotheses. But we are able to say with absolute certainty that these structures are there, and that they are not random, and that someone therefore put them there. From there we can start to do all the investigative volutes we want, but that stuff is there, and someone has its scientific method is important, because the scientific method is based on the repeatability of the experiments. So from my point of view, there is no alternative research or research. So there is no alternative research, this research from my point of view. So what we have Applied is the least we have taken this one of different manufacture, that is they have built different factories, two different companies, we have processed the data, both of one space and the other the same things came out okay, and so this is as far as the measurement of the depth. Actually I turn to Corrado that we took a bit of courage to provide the data of 1 kilometer. We did the impossible, we measured X, we measured it, changes here, changes there, asked the artificial intelligence in case we redid the calculations, artificial intelligence that gave us the same results, and so I am, there is no security. That is, as a scientist I cannot say no, it is just like that because I'm in a stump, but it's like this at 99, that is. There they would make some vertical ducts that go down to a depth of 1 kilometer and to 1.4 mh. We have to look carefully at the fortress is the one from kilometer 2 to kilometer 44 with one of the intermediate boxes. Further down there are some big veins that you can see, we measure them, and so this will be the future. As you have seen, there are many structures that present some singularities at right angles, so the boxes can be seen, and nature is very good. Nature is very good at generating natural cavities. In short, the fact of the net angle seems to me to be something that is done by, could be done by. Someone else, that is from people, in short, that they start to calculate in one height and perfume. So on this I forgot the S, if what you see the tomography is all the same material, because it seems that it is the same. Then to do this I cannot answer you, because to do this you need to do the so-called economic sporoscopy. You can do months, so I have to do tomographies at different frequencies. Create a database, the so-called dictionary of frequencies to the variable of the material, and then give you an answer like A. As you see the seriousness of who is here on the side, let's say of who does the research is the one of where he cannot answer come. I cannot tell you, there is not. However, in any case it is solid. However, it is solid where it shines is under wave, where it shines a little less because there is the fake ground, the so-called contrast material. Maybe there is water is fine, more is less bright, or even there is darkness, no, so where there is something bright. And above all this something of brilliant. Sorry if I go on about this, but as you can see from the wells, the brilliant to get to the sun, because we take the data from the conical spectroscopy from the surface, it must be connected to the surface, otherwise you don't know why. If it is isolated, if there was vibration remains confined down, and we from above do not extract the information. No, this is important. Well, surely this research, the results we are obtaining are extremely important, because they also give confirmation of a pre-existence of a city that lived on this planet in remote times. You know, that time ago. In short, I proposed a vision, let's say, of the dating of the Piana di Chiesa, also because of a series of documents that are considered of little interest, but that with the Progress of this research also take on an increasingly marked value. I am referring, for example, to the word smeradine, because this to answer Thomas first asked a specific question about why Ammeia. So I will also come to you on this question, but also, for example, the chronology of the royal canon and the myths that are told in the Book of the Dead, so there are a whole series of references that suggest a pre-existence that is somewhat determined in 36,400, which is also in line with, let's say, with these documents, and so I want to say this work that we are doing is absolutely relevant because it goes to establish a whole series of conditions that until today seem to be, how to say, not very reliable as regards instead the consideration of the association of this discovery with the city of Ammeia beyond what Professor Ammeia perfectly specified. There are some elements that are emerging from the reconstruction of what we are identifying under the surface that seem to be consistent with some descriptions that we find in the stings. Before I was referring to the emerald tables, where there are precise references to these wells that go deep that were built. In the verse it speaks of the children of light. We don't know who they are, but the objective data remains of the presence of these wells that go deep, as well as the boxes we talked about before, that are described in these times as rooms with the size like space. So just to underline how enormous they were, these rooms, in addition, there is a further reference to the Egyptian Book of the Dead in particular to chapter 149, where there is a description, let's say, of these rooms, not extremely precise. In fact, it speaks of 14 residences, but only some of these are discrete that seem to assume, let's say, from the reconstruction of the precise connotations that leave us, as if to say, give us a relative certainty that we are talking about some rooms, and my hypothesis, which however must be evaluated from a historical point of view, is that about 13,500 years ago, following a cataclysmic event of which we have almost all the reformations today, and which was then reproduced by scientific works, measured therefore substantially 13,500 years ago. Roughly we have what we call inversal, that is, an object or more objects fell on our planet, modifying also the position of the EHM, the Earth's axis. In that context, some scholars argue that the water of the Chiachi rose more than 100 meters in height. And we find traces of this because inside the pyramid of Cheops 2.5 of sea salt were found stuck on all the walls, sea salt that was removed by the Trupchia when he cleaned the pyramids. It is evident that therefore the seawater entered the pyramids and then evaporated slowly, because otherwise 2 centimeters of crystallized salt that is not there. I find this makes me think that 13,500, 1,500 years ago, the pyramid, if it was already working, had stopped working, because after it would have been common. So the idea that I have is that this stuff was used before the universal, after who remained there, the survivors, let's say a few hundreds of years later, returning to that place in Pisa. They restored, as it is written somewhere at the bottom, the pyramid of Cheops, so they did not build it, but they restored it, and then I do not know what they did with it and what use they made of it. Certainly it was not the use of those who built it, and the spatial resolution is defined scientifically as a distance, and it is the minimum distance so that two objects can be separately distinguished. That is, I move away, I have two objects at a certain point, I see two, then I do not see them anymore, I see one. So lambda, what is the wavelength of the physical phenomenon that I use to investigate something, to have a photograph of it? Lambda, I have that length for a distance, so they are both and two in the numerators. This makes me understand that the more I increase the distance and the more it is integrated, the result spatial resolution, more I decrease lambda, so I increase the frequency more. Okay, the resolution increases divided by 2 times the aperture. Here the aperture is fundamental. The aperture is in the cameras is the aperture of the lens. That camera has a higher aperture than a cell phone, from which we can explain the radar synthetic aperture from space. From 680 kilometers to have a spatial resolution, for example submetric on Earth, doing the calculations, you can easily do them at home. It turns out that you have to build an antenna, for example, with a length of 60 to 70 kilometers, that is a piece of iron in the space of 70 kilometers. And how do you do it? Having hypnotized this, let's say city, this structure, that human beings can have water depth and in those temperatures. With those temperatures or other grass sheet. Thanks for the question. In fact, we wanted to talk about it on this. Then I don't know if you want to answer no here, then if okay, then I don't remember how much the temperature increases for every meter that you go underground, so there is a trend certainly increasing of the temperature, and that led us to measure, to calculate a temperature that is certainly higher than the one that is there. But there is one thing to take into consideration from the tomographies. I saw them tomorrow. Maybe we can talk about it more precisely. There are a huge amount of air ducts without snails, because there are ducts with snails and ducts without snails that were probably used to ventilate the area below and above below, and therefore try to maintain a temperature compatible with the leadership, taking into account that in any case the temperatures are high, not not as high as you might think. We made AAGA. We saw that basically 38 degrees at 6,700 meters away, and the interesting thing is that these tubes that we first thought were colors, instead of wind, they are perforated. They can serve as vertical piano exchangers, because the exchangers are made like that, i.e. they are 2 tubes, one inside the other. In one the hot air comes out, and in the other the cold air comes in, so it could be that all of these were used to travel what is underneath. Not by chance in the ancient texts they talk about these deep wells that bring light and water from above life. On the other hand, this methodology that we have applied for these things has in reality a mind-blowing potential, because it could be used to find water in the desert, it could be used to find oil in the desert, it could be used to find precious metals on the Runa or some hole, perhaps not wanted, but if there is the Minnesara project that has already in some way made available some data will be, for example, for the moon, no, because not used, it could be useful to see who knows the enemy substitutable in quotes somewhere, it could in short, so we are beyond the hypothesis banal of looking inside a chin, as certainly it is a technology that will allow us in the future, if used well, to live better from every point of view. Okay, the applications could be multiple, and it seems to me that 2 days ago, there was a restart the activity in the Neapolitan area. Music. Here is an activity, a goal in my opinion, Scorino. Therefore, to donate to humanity is certainly that of the monitoring of the Ergon gods, and therefore going to check, for example, the degree of instantaneous activity of active volcanoes. There are vibrations that could bother us in doing our analysis, and the vegetation, for example, produces some problems because the wind makes the trees move, and basically if one does not place certain filtering conditions afterward, one ends up not seeing anything. That is why we have placed ourselves in the best situation, saying to Giza, leaf grows, that's fine, but surely hunger eats. And so we will also go to discover things in areas such as, for example, the pyramids of Disso that have this problem of the vegetation that there is above, but a little plant that we have already given it to us, but that's another story. My thought is that the exotologists of the mainstream will never change, because one of the characteristics of the human being is equality. Then there are many Egyptologists who are essentially human, have written books, have had the opportunity to issue theories, and maybe before dying, what do? You demonstrate that what they had written was all wrong. The Exuans are not so capable at a conscious level of admitting that they could have been wrong. I live in another world. I live in the world where consciousness is the important thing, not the length of the desk in your department. In this context, we know, and consciousness is used to interpret the tomographies, because through consciousness we have introduced a fundamental parameter, which is the perception of the human being of what was in front of us. Then, in this context, my personal experience is, I have learned in life only when I have failed, that is, only when I have made a mistake, because when one never makes a mistake, one never learns. Or in any case, he would not need to learn then. From this point of view, I would say to the Egyptologists and mainstream, as we have called them, that is, not the famous official science. There is no official science. There is science. There are some scientists a little more and some scientists a little less. But basically it all depends on the level of awareness that one has, I would say. A. What are the chances that a scientist with this mentality, with this type of scientist, perhaps a little exaggerated, a scientist, perhaps a scientist is another thing, A. What are the chances that he will change his opinion? We have also seen it recently in the last 3 years of the pandemic. People have not changed their opinion despite having written a ton of bullshit, so I imagine why. Because changing your opinion is like saying, but I was wrong. So the moment I say, I was wrong, I'm happy to have been wrong because I have learned. Most human beings, on the other hand, are not happy about having made a mistake because they think they made a bad impression here.